Today I will be talking about how the U.S. intervened in Nicaragua, even though they needed no help. Nicaragua was advancing by themselves, but the U.S. claimed that they were not capable of self-rule. The U.S.'s decisions affects us every day. We should be aware, and as a general public, we should know more about the events and the reasons why the U.S. intervenes in foreign affairs. And we can decide whether we think it is right or wrong. I am not an expert in foreign affairs, but I have researched this topic last semester for my history class in great detail. As an Air Force ROTC student, I have met with multiple individuals and talked to them about foreign affairs, and they have had to deal with these situations in their daily lives. Today, I will describe why the U.S. intervened in Nicaragua, the placement of the Panama Canal, and how the President of Nicaragua decided they wanted to unite the Central Powers. And today I'll also talk about how the U.S. decided to overthrow President Zeyala. First, I will talk about what initiated the U.S. to intervene in Nicaragua, which was the building of the canal. President Zeyala of Nicaragua was advancing the economy. He had plans to build the interoceanic canal that would put Nicaragua on the world stage. Confident in his plan to build the canal, Zeyala saw no problems going wrong, but the U.S. decided there was no benefit in the canal not being built in Panama. So the U.S. devised a scheme to talk about how there was tons of volcano activity inside of Nicaragua, and that would end up being dangerous. I found this info on the website titled 7 Fascinating Facts About the Panama Canal by Elizabeth Nix. To reiterate, President Roosevelt got people to claim that Nicaragua was dangerous because of a stamp that was actually created in New York. This was a Nicaragua stamp that had a picture of a volcano on it. After winning the reputation of the United States in multiple countries, the plan was devised to build the canal across Panama. But at this time, Colombia owned Panama, and they would not relinquish their rights for the U.S. to build on their land. So they decided to convince the Panamanians that the Colombians were controlling them. And so the Panamanians went about trying to win their independence. And this ended up being successful. After this, the U.S. promised that the Panamanians would be independent. But as soon as that happened, the U.S. moved in and started building the canal. The decisions of the U.S. are based on power, or sometimes they're about the good of the people. But it is our decision that we can decide whether it's right or wrong, and this differs from individual to individual. First, I talked about what started the foreign affairs. Now we'll be talking about how President Zeyala decided he wanted to unite Central America. President Zeyala united Central Powers to strengthen the economy. This plan was unsuccessful, but either way, this plan angered the United States. The plan involved uniting Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. This plan was unsuccessful, even with political and military pressure. Zeyala started interfering with U.S. companies that were in Nicaragua, and this started angering the U.S. even more. Eventually, with the little success that President Zeyala had of uniting the Central Powers, he pushed the British out. But after that, the U.S. moved in and decided that they wanted to make a deal. So they would, in exchange for the rights to mine and log in Nicaragua, the U.S. would build a railroad for Nicaragua and plant 2 trees for every tree that they cut down. The U.S. did not follow through on these promises. Governor Knox was angered again when President Zeyala later decided to borrow 1.25 million pounds from Europe because he wanted to fulfill his dream of building the railroad that the U.S. did not follow through on building. After this, there was rumors that President Zeyala was either working with Japan or Europe to build another canal and undermining the U.S. This, of course, was not true, but it stirred up a lot of chaos. This information was found in the book called Overthrow by Stephen Kinzer. As a general population, we have the right to decide. if you believe the U.S. had the right to be angered by this money being borrowed, or if Nicaragua had the right to advance their economy however they saw fit. Now I will discuss how the U.S. involved itself in Nicaraguan affairs. And now I have discussed how the U.S. has involved itself in Nicaraguan affairs, built the Panama Canal, and how the U.S. felt that the Central Powers were uniting and pushing them out of control. Next, I will discuss what ultimately led to the overthrow of President Zeyala of Nicaragua. So the U.S. yearned to overthrow President Zeyala, but they were never successful because they didn't have sufficient evidence to overthrow the president. So Governor Knox from the United States, under the rule of President Roosevelt, decided to politically attack Zeyala. He sent anti-Zeyala reporters to find dangerous information on the president and present it to the public. On October 1909, General Estrada became president, and he was financially backed by the U.S. This was the U.S.'s plot to start pushing President Zeyala out of power. He built a militia, but there was no success. They sent in more rebels, but what happened was there was 2 rebels that were caught, and they confessed to placing mines in the San Juan River to explode the naval vessel with Nicaraguan soldiers aboard. So the President Zeyala took lead and decided to sentence them to death by firing squad. After doing this labeled President Zeyala as a war criminal and pushed him out of office with the Knox note that said that the United States would pretty much never stop until President Zeyala was thrown out of power. President Zeyala gave his farewell speech and then sailed into exile, and Estrada permanently became president. According to the article Nicaragua, the First Real American Coup by Valdez, President Zeyala's last words were that he was just happy if his resign meant that it would be the end of the chaos for Central America. The U.S. hosted many coups over the years, but this was the first. A coup is a setup, like this scenario, to overthrow a leader of a nation. Some of these coups are for the good of the people, and others are for power. But either way, their decisions affect us all, indirectly. In conclusion, you all have learned about the involvement of the U.S. in Nicaragua. The involvement of the U.S. in Nicaragua caused Central Powers to eventually fall into chaos after losing a strong leader. The U.S. gained power over Nicaragua and gained multiple benefits, but that eventually ended. The U.S. led to the building of the canal in Panama across Nicaragua. They ended up uniting Central America and then separating Central America, just as Zeyala did. And they overthrew the former president of Nicaragua, which was Zeyala. The public doesn't read much on the details of foreign affairs and how the U.S. involves itself in other countries. But from what you've heard and what you've learned from public social media and from this presentation, it is up to you to interpret the results. The facts are facts. Some can be seen as good and others as bad, but it's up to you to create them. It's up to history to create them, but it is up to you to define them. Thank you.